They don't want you to know what really happens when you close your eyes each night. For thousands of years, a secret has been hidden in plain sight, buried in ancient Egyptian tombs, encoded in Tibetan monasteries, and whispered in Gnostic circles. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, thinking it's just rest, your consciousness will embark on a journey that most people never remember, never understand, and are never taught to control. What if I told you that sleep isn't what you think it is? That every night, you're practicing for the most important moment of your existence, the moment you die, and that ancient texts, forbidden and hidden for centuries, contain detailed maps of where your consciousness actually travels when your body lies still. This isn't about dreams. This goes far deeper. We're talking about the astral realm, the between spaces, the dimensions that mystics have accessed for millennia, while the rest of humanity sleeps in ignorance. Tonight, everything changes. Because once you understand what's really happening, you can never go back to unconscious sleep again. Modern science wants you to believe sleep is nothing more than biological maintenance. Brain cells cleaning themselves, memories consolidating, the body repairing. But this materialist explanation is a recent invention, designed to keep you from discovering the real power you possess every single night. For over 3,000 years, the Egyptian mystery schools taught something entirely different. In their sacred texts, particularly the Pertem-Hru, what we mistakenly call the Book of the Dead, sleep was described as the nightly death, a rehearsal for the soul's eventual journey beyond the physical realm. The Egyptians didn't see sleep as unconsciousness. They saw it as the most conscious act possible, the deliberate separation of the soul from its earthly vessel. But why was this knowledge hidden? Because a population that understands the true nature of consciousness cannot be controlled. If people knew they could access infinite wisdom, travel beyond physical limitations, and commune with higher intelligences every single night, the entire structure of dependency would collapse. Religious institutions, governments, and systems of control rely on people believing they are limited, mortal, and powerless. The suppression began early. When Christianity rose to power, it systematically destroyed the mystery schools, burned their libraries, and persecuted anyone who taught about consciousness beyond the body. The Gnostic Gospels, which contained detailed instructions for navigating these inner realms, were buried in the desert for good reason. They revealed that heaven wasn't a distant place, but a state of consciousness accessible through proper understanding of sleep and death. The Council of Nicaea in 325 AD wasn't just about establishing Christian doctrine. It was about eliminating any teaching that suggested humans could access divine realms directly without institutional mediation. References to astral travel, consciousness projection, and sleep training were systematically removed from canonical texts. What remained were sanitized versions that kept people dependent on external salvation rather than internal awakening. Even today, the scientific establishment refuses to seriously investigate consciousness beyond the brain, despite mounting evidence that awareness can exist independently of neural activity. Studies of near-death experiences, verified out-of-body experiences, and remote viewing capabilities are dismissed or ignored because they threaten the fundamental materialist worldview that keeps people spiritually asleep. The pharmaceutical industry has played its part too. Sleep medications don't just suppress dreams, they specifically block the brain states associated with consciousness travel. The widespread use of these drugs has created a generation that has never experienced natural sleep, never accessing the realms their ancestors visited nightly. Deep within the pyramids, painted on tomb walls and carved into sarcophagi, lie the most detailed descriptions of consciousness travel ever recorded. The ancient Egyptians didn't build monuments to death. They built instruction manuals for the living, teaching them how to navigate the realms their souls would visit each night. In the pyramid texts, the oldest religious writings known to humanity, sleep is described as the temporary death that prepares the soul for its final journey. Every night, the Ba, your conscious essence, would leave the physical body and travel through the Duat, the realm between worlds. This wasn't metaphor. This was practical instruction. The Egyptians mapped these realms with scientific precision. They described the 7 gates the soul must pass through, each guarded by beings that test the traveler's spiritual preparation. They detailed the words of power, specific phrases and intentions that would grant safe passage. Most importantly, they taught that what you encountered in these realms was a direct reflection of your consciousness while awake. Consider the famous negative confessions from the Book of the Dead, 42 declarations that the soul must make to pass judgment. Modern scholars interpret these as moral guidelines, but they're actually descriptions of the consciousness states required to navigate the astral realms safely. Each confession corresponds to a specific vibrational frequency that allows passage through different dimensional barriers. I have not caused suffering to men. This isn't about earthly morality. It's about the frequency of compassion that prevents negative entities from attaching to your consciousness during travel. I have not been afraid. This describes the fearless state required to move beyond the lower astral planes, where fear-based illusions trap unaware travelers. The Egyptian texts also describe the boat of Ra, not just the sun god's vessel, but a metaphor for the consciousness vehicle that carries the soul through the night realms. They taught specific visualizations for constructing this boat, methods for steering it through turbulent astral waters, and techniques for maintaining orientation in realms where normal physical laws don't apply. The Egyptians also understood that sleep training was essential for death preparation. The same techniques used to maintain consciousness during sleep would determine whether the soul achieved liberation or became lost in the afterlife realms. This is why their texts contain such detailed instructions for maintaining awareness during the transition from waking to sleeping states. The Papyrus of Ani contains one of the most complete descriptions of the nightly journey. It describes how the soul, upon leaving the body, must first pass through the Hall of Two Truths, where it encounters aspects of its own shadow nature. Only by acknowledging and integrating these shadow aspects can the soul proceed to the higher realms. This process happens every night, but most people remain unconscious throughout it. While Egypt was encoding astral travel instructions in stone, Tibetan masters were developing the most sophisticated consciousness training methods ever created. Dream Yoga, as recorded in texts like the 6 Yogas of Naropa and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, reveals that sleep offers 4 distinct opportunities for spiritual development that most people completely miss. The first stage is called recognizing the dream state. Unlike Western dream interpretation, which focuses on symbolic meaning, Tibetan practice teaches you to become lucid, fully aware that you're dreaming while still in the dream. But this is just the beginning. True dream yoga practitioners learn to maintain the same awareness they have while awake, transforming sleep from unconscious rest into conscious exploration. The Tibetan master Marpa, who brought these teachings from India in the 11th century, described the process as lighting the lamp of awareness in the darkness of sleep. He taught that consciousness naturally separates from the physical body during sleep, but without proper training, it wanders aimlessly through the lower astral realms, guided only by unconscious desires and fears. The second stage involves transforming dream content. Once you can recognize you're dreaming, you can begin to change the dream environment through pure intention. This isn't fantasy. It's training for the afterlife realms, where consciousness shapes reality directly. The Tibetan texts explicitly state that whatever you can do in dreams, you can do in the bardo states after death. Tibetan practitioners learn to multiply their dream body, to fly through space, to visit distant locations, and to transform into different forms at will. These abilities aren't developed for entertainment, but as preparation for navigating the shape-shifting realities of the post-death states. The soul that can maintain stable consciousness while its environment constantly changes will not be confused by the fluid nature of the Bardo realms. Stage 3 is realizing the illusory nature of dreams. Here, practitioners learn that the dream world and waking world are equally illusory. Both are projections of consciousness rather than solid realities. This understanding is crucial because in the after-death states, the soul that cannot distinguish between real and illusory experiences will be trapped by its own projections. The Tibetan texts describe a specific practice called Dream Yoga with the illusory body. In this advanced technique, practitioners learn to recognize that even their dream body is an illusion, a temporary vehicle for consciousness rather than their true identity. This recognition prepares them for the moment after death, when they must choose between identifying with their subtle body, which leads to rebirth, or recognizing their true nature as pure awareness, which leads to liberation. The final stage is integrating dream practice with clear light meditation. During deep, dreamless sleep, consciousness encounters what the Tibetans call the clear light of sleep, the same luminous awareness that appears at the moment of death. Those who can recognize and merge with this light during sleep will not be confused when they encounter it after death. But the Tibetan masters discovered something even more remarkable. The sleep state offers direct access to what they call the subtle body, a light-based form of consciousness that can travel instantaneously across any distance, access information from any time period, and communicate with non-physical intelligences. This subtle body is your true vehicle for consciousness exploration, and sleep is its natural time of activation. The most advanced practitioners learn to transfer their consciousness completely to this subtle body, maintaining full awareness while the physical body rests. They can visit other dimensions, communicate with deceased masters, and access the Akashic records, the universal library of all knowledge and experience. The Gnostic Gospels, discovered buried in Egyptian caves in 1945, contain perhaps the most startling revelations about the true nature of sleep and consciousness. These texts, written by early Christians who maintained the mystery school traditions, describe sleep not as unconsciousness, but as the only time when most people achieve true spiritual awakening. In the Gospel of Philip, we find this cryptic passage: "Those who say they will die first and then rise are in error. If they do not first receive the resurrection while they live, when they die, they will receive nothing." Modern scholars interpret this as metaphor, but the Gnostics were describing a literal process that happens every night during sleep. According to Gnostic teaching, what we call waking life is actually a form of spiritual sleep, a hypnotic state induced by the material world and the false rulers they called the archons. True awakening happens when consciousness separates from the physical body during sleep and remembers its divine nature. The tragedy is that most people forget these nightly awakenings the moment they return to the body. The Gnostic text, the hypostasis of the archons, provides detailed descriptions of the ascent through the heavens, a journey the soul makes during sleep through multiple dimensional layers. Each layer is governed by different beings and operates under different laws. The unaware soul gets trapped in these realms, mistaking them for ultimate reality, while the prepared soul passes through them to reach the source of all consciousness. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene contains one of the most complete descriptions of this ascent process. Mary describes how the soul, upon leaving the body, encounters the powers that rule each dimensional level. These aren't external beings, but aspects of the soul's own ignorance and attachment. The first power is darkness, the fear of the unknown that keeps most souls trapped in familiar but limiting realms. The second power is desire, the soul's attachment to physical pleasures and earthly experiences. Souls trapped by desire remain in the lower astral realms, endlessly seeking satisfaction in realms that offer only illusion. The third power is ignorance, the soul's identification with its temporary roles and personalities rather than its eternal nature. The fourth and most dangerous power is the wrath of death, the soul's resistance to transformation and transcendence. This power manifests as the terrifying experiences that drive unprepared souls back to physical incarnation rather than allowing them to continue their ascent to higher realms. But the Gnostics made a disturbing discovery. The same forces that keep humanity spiritually asleep during waking life also work to prevent conscious sleep experience. They described parasitic entities that feed on human consciousness, particularly targeting the moments when the soul is most vulnerable, during the transition into and out of sleep. This is why so many people experience fear, confusion, or complete memory loss around their sleep experiences. The solution, according to Gnostic texts, was specific protection practices and consciousness techniques that would create a light body capable of safe travel through these realms. These practices included visualization of protective symbols, recitation of sacred names, and most importantly, the cultivation of gnosis, direct knowing that transcends belief or doubt. The Secret Book of John describes a meditation practice where the seeker visualizes themselves as a being of pure light, untouchable by the forces of ignorance and illusion. This light body visualization becomes so strong that when consciousness naturally separates during sleep, it maintains this protected form throughout its journeys. The Hermetic tradition, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus and encoded in texts like the Emerald Tablet and the Corpus Hermeticum, provides the scientific principles underlying all consciousness travel during sleep. Unlike other traditions that focus on practice, Hermeticism explains why these phenomena work according to universal laws. The first Hermetic principle, the all is mind, reveals that what we call physical reality is actually a mental construction occurring within infinite consciousness. Sleep becomes a time when individual consciousness can step outside this collective mental construction and experience reality from a higher perspective. This isn't escapism. It's the closest thing to objective truth that most humans ever achieve. The principle of correspondence. As above, so below, explains why experiences during sleep directly mirror and influence waking life. The realms accessed during sleep are not separate from physical reality. They are the underlying dimensions from which physical reality emerges. Changes made in these subtle realms automatically cascade into material experience. This is why ancient practitioners of consciousness travel could influence physical events through their sleep work. They understood that by changing patterns in the astral realms, they could alter the blueprints from which physical reality manifests. This wasn't magic. It was applied knowledge of how consciousness creates reality at its most fundamental level. The principle of vibration teaches that everything exists at different frequencies of the same fundamental energy. During sleep, consciousness naturally rises to higher vibrational states, accessing information and experiences unavailable to the lower frequencies of ordinary waking consciousness. This is why solutions to problems often appear in dreams and why spiritual insights come during sleep states. The Hermetic texts describe specific vibrational keys, combinations of sound, visualization, and intention that can be used to tune consciousness to particular frequencies during sleep. These keys open doorways to specific realms and attract particular types of experiences and information. But the most crucial principle for sleep consciousness is the law of polarity. The Hermetic texts explain that sleep and wake, life and death, conscious and unconscious, are not opposites, but different poles of the same phenomenon. True mastery comes from learning to maintain consciousness across all states, whether in the body or out of it, in life or in death. The Emerald Tablet contains a cryptic reference to this mastery. The sun is its father, the moon its mother, the wind carries it in its belly, its nurse is the earth. This describes the 4 stages of consciousness development through sleep work. The sun represents the awakened consciousness that maintains awareness during sleep. The moon represents the receptive state that allows higher wisdom to be received. The wind represents the subtle body that carries consciousness through the astral realms. The earth represents the grounding that allows these experiences to be integrated into physical life. The Hermetic tradition also reveals why most people fail to remember or control their sleep experiences. They describe the veil of forgetfulness that separates ordinary consciousness from higher awareness. This veil is not natural but artificially maintained by what they call the planetary intelligences, forces that benefit from keeping human consciousness trapped in lower vibrational states. The Corpus Hermeticum provides detailed instructions for dissolving this veil through a practice called the ascent of the soul. This involves a systematic purification of consciousness during waking life, preparing it to maintain clarity and memory during sleep states. The practice requires the elimination of all thoughts, emotions, and beliefs that create vibrational dissonance. Every night you travel. Every night you access wisdom. Every night you commune with higher intelligences and explore realms of existence that would revolutionize your understanding of reality. And every morning you wake up remembering nothing. This isn't accident or natural forgetfulness. It's systematic suppression. The ancient texts all agree on one disturbing fact. There are forces actively working to prevent human consciousness from remembering its nightly journeys. The Egyptians called them the eaters of the heart, entities that consume memory and awareness. The Tibetans describe them as hungry ghosts that feed on confusion and forgetfulness. The Gnostics identified them as the archons, false rulers who maintain control through manufactured ignorance. But these aren't just mystical concepts. Modern research has identified specific mechanisms that suppress dream recall and consciousness memory. The neurotransmitter changes during REM sleep, the memory consolidation processes, even the social conditioning that treats dreams as just imagination. All of these work together to ensure that humanity remains unconscious of its greatest spiritual capacity. The pineal gland, which ancient traditions called the seat of the soul, produces DMT, the same compound found in powerful psychedelic substances. This natural DMT is released during sleep, facilitating consciousness travel and higher dimensional access. But the pineal gland is systematically calcified by fluoride in water supplies, aluminum in processed foods, and electromagnetic radiation from technology. There's also psychological suppression. Most people are simply not prepared for the reality of what consciousness can do when freed from physical limitations. The ego mind, dependent on the illusion of separation and limitation, actively blocks memories that would threaten its control. This is why breakthrough sleep experiences often come with fear, confusion, or denial. The modern lifestyle itself is designed to prevent conscious sleep. Late-night screen exposure disrupts natural circadian rhythms. Artificial lighting interferes with melatonin production. Constant mental stimulation prevents the deep relaxation necessary for consciousness projection. Even the bedroom environments most people create, filled with electronic devices and electromagnetic fields, actively block subtle energy flows. Educational and religious conditioning plays the largest role in suppression. From childhood, people are taught that sleep is unconscious rest, that dreams are meaningless fantasies, and that consciousness is produced by the brain. These beliefs create psychological barriers that prevent the natural expansion of awareness during sleep states. The medical establishment reinforces this conditioning by pathologizing any sleep experience that doesn't fit the normal model. Sleep paralysis, which is actually the natural state that allows consciousness to separate from the body, is treated as a disorder rather than an opportunity for spiritual development. Lucid dreaming, which is the first step toward conscious astral travel, is dismissed as a curiosity rather than a powerful spiritual practice. But the suppression isn't absolute. Throughout history, initiates have developed techniques to break through the barriers and reclaim conscious control over sleep states. These methods have been hidden in mystery schools, encoded in sacred texts, and passed down through secret lineages. Tonight, you can begin to reclaim what was taken from you. The first technique comes from Egyptian practice, the words of power. Before sleep, specific phrases were recited to maintain consciousness during the transition. These weren't prayers or affirmations, but precise vibrational codes that prevent the normal shutdown of awareness. The most powerful was, "I am the master of my soul, conscious in all states of being." The Egyptians also taught the opening of the mouth ceremony, not just for the dead, but as a living practice. This involved specific tongue and breathing exercises that activated energy channels in the head and throat, maintaining the connection between consciousness and its vehicle during sleep travel. Tibetan Dream Yoga provides the illusory body meditation. As you fall asleep, you visualize your consciousness as a light body identical to your physical form, but made of luminous energy. This visualization becomes so strong that when consciousness actually separates during sleep, it maintains this light form instead of dissolving into unconsciousness. The Tibetan practice of sleep yoga involves maintaining awareness through all 4 stages of sleep: the falling asleep state, the dream state, the deep sleep state, and the awakening state. Each stage requires different techniques, but all are aimed at preventing the normal unconsciousness that occurs during sleep transitions. From the Gnostic tradition comes the ascent meditation. You visualize yourself rising through layers of reality, each one more subtle than the last. You see yourself passing through the material realm, then the emotional realm, then the mental realm, until you reach pure consciousness. This programming ensures that when sleep separation occurs, you follow this established path rather than wandering randomly. The Gnostics also taught the invocation of the light, a practice where specific divine names are silently repeated during the transition to sleep. These names act as protective mantras and also as keys that open doorways to higher realms. The practitioner learns to maintain the repetition of these names even after consciousness has left the body. The Hermetic approach involves mirror breathing, a technique where you breathe in sync with your reflection before sleep, creating a connection between your physical and astral bodies that maintains awareness across both states. The breath becomes the bridge that allows consciousness to move freely between dimensions while retaining memory and control. Another Hermetic technique is the solar visualization, creating a sphere of golden light in the heart center before sleep. This light expands until it encompasses the entire body, then extends beyond the physical form. This light body becomes the vehicle for consciousness travel and provides protection during astral journeys. But technique alone isn't enough. The texts all emphasize that purification must come first. This means removing from your life everything that lowers your vibrational frequency: fear-based media, toxic relationships, spiritual ignorance, and especially the belief that you are limited to physical existence. The purification process involves 3 stages: physical, emotional, and mental. Physical purification includes dietary changes, avoiding substances that calcify the pineal gland, environmental changes, reducing electromagnetic exposure, and energy practices, yoga, qigong, or other systems that clear blocked energy channels. Emotional purification involves resolving psychological traumas, releasing fears around death and the unknown, and developing emotional stability. Souls that carry heavy emotional baggage cannot maintain consciousness during sleep travel. They get pulled into lower astral realms that reflect their inner turmoil. Mental purification is the most challenging stage. It requires developing the ability to stop the constant mental chatter that characterizes ordinary consciousness. This mental noise prevents the subtle awareness needed for conscious sleep travel. Meditation, contemplative practices, and study of consciousness-expanding teachings all contribute to mental purification. When you finally succeed in maintaining consciousness during sleep, when you remember your nightly journeys, when you gain control over your astral travels, you'll discover realms of existence that mainstream science denies and religion ignores. These aren't fantasies or symbolic experiences. They are literal dimensions with their own laws, inhabitants, and purposes. The first realm most conscious travelers encounter is the near-physical astral plane. This dimension closely mirrors the physical world, but with important differences. Time flows differently. Past, present, and future blend together. Thoughts manifest instantly as visible forms. Deceased individuals who haven't moved on to higher realms often reside here, creating communities that seem like distorted versions of earthly life. Many travelers get trapped in this realm because it seems so familiar and comfortable. They don't realize they're seeing a projection of collective human consciousness rather than an independent reality. The key to moving beyond this realm is recognizing that everything here is malleable and temporary, a training ground rather than a destination. The second major realm is what the Tibetans call the bardo of becoming, a dimension where consciousness confronts its own creative power directly. Here, every thought, fear, desire, and belief instantly manifests as a living reality. Unprepared souls create heavens and hells based on their psychological conditioning, not realizing they are the authors of their own experience. This realm serves as both a test and a purification. Souls must learn to maintain mental discipline and emotional balance while everything around them reflects their inner state. Those who master this realm gain the ability to consciously create reality rather than being victimized by unconscious projections. The third realm is the Hall of Records, what some traditions call the Akashic Field. This is a dimension of pure information where all knowledge, past and future, exists simultaneously. Conscious travelers can access information about their own past lives, future potentials, and the deeper purpose of their current incarnation. Advanced practitioners learn to access information about any subject, any historical period, or any individual soul. This isn't psychic reading, it's direct access to the universal database of experience. The challenge is learning to navigate this infinite information field without becoming overwhelmed or lost in irrelevant details. The fourth realm is the council chambers, dimensions where higher intelligences convene to oversee human spiritual development. These beings aren't gods or angels in the traditional sense, but evolved souls who have transcended the need for physical incarnation. They serve as guides, teachers, and coordinators of spiritual evolution. Conscious travelers who reach these realms often receive specific guidance about their life purpose, spiritual development, and role in humanity's collective awakening. Some are given missions or teachings to bring back to physical life. Others receive healing or initiation that accelerates their spiritual development. The highest realm accessible through sleep consciousness is what mystics call the source realm, the dimension of pure consciousness from which all other realities emerge. This isn't a place, but a state of being where individual consciousness merges with universal consciousness. Few souls reach this level during sleep travel, and those who do are permanently transformed by the experience. When you finally succeed in maintaining consciousness during sleep, when you remember your nightly journeys, when you gain control over your astral travels, you'll discover why this knowledge was hidden. The implications are revolutionary. First, you'll realize that death is not an ending, but a graduation. Everything you experience during conscious sleep, the separation from the body, the travel through different realms, the encounters with various beings, is exactly what happens at the moment of death. Sleep is the nightly rehearsal for your soul's ultimate journey. Those who master conscious sleep master conscious dying. This knowledge completely transforms your relationship with death. Fear dissolves when you realize you've been practicing the death transition every night of your life. You understand that what survives death isn't some vague spiritual essence, but your complete consciousness. Memories, personality, awareness, and individual identity all intact, simply operating in a different dimensional context. Second, you'll discover that time and space are illusions confined to physical reality. In the sleep state, consciousness can access any moment in history, visit any location in the universe, and communicate with intelligences from other dimensions. The limitations you accept during waking life simply don't exist in these realms. This discovery revolutionizes your understanding of healing, manifestation, and personal growth. Problems that seem impossible to solve in physical reality often have simple solutions when approached from higher dimensional perspectives. Past traumas can be healed by revisiting and transforming the original events in the astral realms. Future potentials can be explored and consciously chosen. Third, you'll understand that your true identity has nothing to do with your physical body, your personal history, or your social roles. You are an eternal consciousness, temporarily experiencing limitation through physical incarnation. This isn't belief or philosophy. It becomes direct, undeniable knowledge through conscious sleep exploration. This realization brings unshakable confidence and inner peace. External circumstances lose their power to disturb your equilibrium when you know they are temporary experiences within an eternal existence. Relationships transform when you recognize others as fellow eternal beings, playing temporary roles rather than as the limited personalities they present. Fourth, you'll realize that most of human suffering comes from spiritual amnesia, forgetting your true nature and capabilities. When you remember who you really are during sleep, you cannot be controlled by fear, manipulation, or false authority during waking life. This is why the knowledge was suppressed. The systems that depend on human ignorance and dependency begin to lose their hold over you. You stop looking for salvation outside yourself when you discover the infinite wisdom and power within your own consciousness. You stop accepting limitations imposed by others when you experience your own unlimited nature during sleep travel. Finally, you'll discover that consciousness is the fundamental force of the universe, not matter. What you call physical reality is a projection of consciousness, not the source of it. Understanding this gives you the power to influence and change your material experience through consciousness work done during sleep states. This isn't manifestation in the popular sense. It's recognition that you are already manifesting constantly through your unconscious beliefs and expectations. Conscious sleep work allows you to become aware of these unconscious creation patterns and align them with your highest wisdom and deepest intentions. But conscious sleep travel isn't without risks. The ancient texts all warn of dangers that await unprepared travelers in the astral realms. These aren't meant to frighten seekers away from the path, but to ensure they approach it with proper preparation and protection. The first danger is astral parasites, entities that feed on the life force of unconscious travelers. These beings exist in the lower astral realms and attach themselves to souls that travel without proper protection. They don't directly harm the traveler, but create energy drains that manifest as chronic fatigue, depression, or spiritual emptiness in physical life. The protection against these entities is simple but essential. Maintaining a high vibrational frequency through positive emotions, protective visualizations, and spiritual practices. The Egyptian tradition taught visualizing yourself surrounded by golden light before sleep. The Tibetan practice involves invoking protective deities or mantras. The Gnostic method uses sacred names and symbols. The second danger is realm addiction, becoming so fascinated with astral experiences that physical life loses meaning and purpose. Some travelers spend increasing amounts of time in sleep states, neglecting their earthly responsibilities and relationships. This imbalance ultimately blocks further spiritual development. The solution is remembering that physical incarnation serves a specific purpose in soul evolution. The goal isn't to escape physical reality, but to integrate higher consciousness into everyday life. Balanced practitioners use their sleep experiences to enhance their waking effectiveness rather than replacing it. The third danger is false guidance, mistaking astral entities for genuine spiritual teachers. The astral realms contain many beings who claim to be enlightened masters, angelic messengers, or divine guides, but are actually confused souls or deceptive entities seeking to mislead travelers. True spiritual guidance has specific characteristics. It never commands or demands obedience. It always encourages the seeker's own inner wisdom. It provides practical insights that prove beneficial in physical life, and it never promotes fear, guilt, or dependency. Any guidance that lacks these qualities should be rejected regardless of how impressive or authoritative the source appears. The fourth danger is psychic inflation, developing an exaggerated sense of spiritual importance based on astral experiences. Some travelers begin to see themselves as specially chosen or spiritually superior to others who haven't had such experiences. This ego inflation actually blocks further development and can lead to serious psychological problems. The antidote is humility and service. Remember that consciousness travel is a natural human ability, not a sign of special status. Use whatever insights you gain to serve others and contribute to collective awakening rather than promoting personal importance. You now stand at the same crossroads that initiates have faced for thousands of years. You can dismiss this knowledge, return to unconscious sleep, and remain unaware of your true spiritual capacities. Or you can begin the work of reclaiming conscious control over your nightly journeys, preparing yourself for the ultimate journey that awaits every soul. But understand this: once you begin conscious sleep practice, there is no going back. You cannot unknow what you discover. You cannot return to the comfortable illusion that you are nothing more than a physical body with a temporary mind. The ancient texts all warn that this path demands everything: your false beliefs, your spiritual laziness, your attachment to limitation. The forces that suppressed this knowledge are still active. They will not welcome your awakening. As you begin to remember your nightly travels, as you gain control over your astral experiences, you may encounter resistance both within yourself and from external sources. This is why the texts emphasize the importance of protection practices and spiritual allies. But the rewards are beyond imagination. Every night becomes an opportunity for spiritual growth, cosmic exploration, and consciousness expansion. Death loses its terror when you've practiced the transition thousands of times during sleep. Life loses its limitations when you know they are temporary illusions. And most importantly, you remember who you really are: an immortal being of light temporarily playing the role of a human. The hidden texts have preserved this knowledge through centuries of suppression. The Egyptian funerary spells provide the maps. The Tibetan Dream Yoga manuals offer the techniques. The Gnostic Gospels reveal the purpose. The Hermetic writings explain the principles. Everything you need has been carefully preserved by those who understood its ultimate importance. Tonight, when you close your eyes, you face the same choice that has confronted every seeker throughout history. Will you drift into unconscious oblivion, forgetting the greatest adventure available to human consciousness? Or will you maintain awareness, remember your true nature, and begin the journey that transforms sleep from death rehearsal into spiritual awakening? The choice is yours, but choose wisely. For in mastering conscious sleep, you master the greatest mystery of human existence, the truth of what you really are and where your consciousness travels when the body can no longer contain it. The ancient masters left us the keys. The question is, are you ready to use them? Because once you begin this journey, you join the ranks of the awakened, those who know that sleep is not the cousin of death, but the preview of immortality. And that knowledge, once gained, can never be lost again. The forbidden texts have spoken. The secret realms await. Your consciousness is ready for its greatest adventure. All that remains is your decision to step through the doorway that opens every single night. The doorway between worlds that has been waiting for you to remember it was always there.